Thank you, Congressman. I get asked this question again. What is your comprehensive plan to shape your future administration's energy policy? And please include how this vision differs from the approach of the current administration.
Well, my plan is we need to produce energy the same way we produce cell phones. We need to get the government out of the way. We need a lot of competition, and we need to deregulate. I've been in Washington off and on for a good many years. I've met a lot of bureaucrats and I've met a lot of politicians. They don't know anything about energy. Why should they make the plan? They have a responsibility for providing the right environment, and that is the market environment. The point I'm making about the cell phones, the markets, in spite of all our problems, the market still delivers cell phones to us. Can you imagine if we gave a contract to the Department of Homeland Security to provide cell phones, and they provided one company and they set the prices? It would cost a lot of money and the phones wouldn't work. So we don't need a policy other than the policy of the marketplace. We need to understand property rights. We need to understand contract rights. We need to understand competition. But today, and of course, the Obama administration doesn't understand any of this, so I reject everything that they do because they interject, like putting on moratoriums and supporting regulations. But the sooner you can get to the concept of property rights and contracts, all of Texas energy was developed without government. When we came into the Union, we essentially had no government property. But out in the West now, where some of this oil shale and other things are, so much of it is government-owned land. We need to get this land in ownership of private property owners, and then we need to get the government out of the way.
If you could reverse one energy-related policy decision from the last 3 years, what would it be, and what would you have done differently?
Well, there isn't one policy because of the overall policy of interference. The policy that this administration has followed is intervention. He follows a whole philosophy of economic intervention. So you have to reverse the policy of Keynesian economic intervention and reinstill in the American people the concept and the understanding of how real free markets work and sound money works. So that is what has to happen, but all the policies that result from intervention disturb the markets, and you can't do that unless you have a lot of other things. In order to reverse that, you have to deregulate across the board, you have to change the tax code, you have to have the sound money system, you have to have better trade policies, and all these things would generate the type of energy that we need. We do have the energy. There is just no doubt about that. But because we don't understand this issue of property rights and contract rights and true competition and sound money, we're in this mess we're in. So the goal ought to be freedom, not necessarily deciding exactly where you're going to buy your oil. I don't fear the fact that you might have imports. What if somebody wants to sell us something cheaper, we can make it? You don't want to deny that benefit to us, but you have to have freedom of choice. You have to have free markets in order to find out where the best deal is, and that should be across the board with all products, not just the energy.
Congressman Paul, thank you for being here tonight. My first question is, what would you specifically do to prevent abortion on demand and defend traditional marriage?
Well, traditional marriage is obviously, between a man and woman, and I have supported the Defense of Marriage Act and to protect the states' rights, to make sure the federal government never dictates or mandates, the definition of marriage. But I have a bill in that so far this evening it has not been mentioned, and I think it's a very important bill because I think we can accomplish a lot with marriage and abortion if we would accept one more principle. I accept the idea of working to change our courts and to change our Constitution, and I support the idea. As an OB doctor, I know when life begins. I know when I assume responsibility for two people, because if I do harm to the fetus, and I can be sued. And so therefore there's no doubt about the legality, not only the morality, but the legality of it. But so I support these efforts. But my bill is called We the People's Act, and this can be accomplished not by waiting for the courts to be changed and not for waiting to amend the Constitution. That is very, very difficult. But lives could be saved, and they could have been saved many, many years ago by saying, why don't we get, Roe versus Wade repealed by removing the jurisdiction of all these issues from the federal courts. That's what we need to do. When Roe versus Wade was a law in Texas, it went to the Supreme Court, they nationalized it. I know it's tempting to wait for the courts to be changed and the amendment to be passed, and it's a national solution, and I support that. But it's taking too long. One of the biggest problems we got into, and I remember it so clearly because I had gone through that experience of watching the law change in 1960, and of course with the Roe versus Wade. But you can pass this just with another law, and that would essentially, if Iowa passed a law, it could not be repealed, and it could be done just by majority vote with the president that will sign this. So I would definitely work very hard on that to revitalize that interest and try to encourage people to say, yes, it might not solve every single problem, but look at how much it could help. And that is what I think we should do in the meantime until we solve the problem finally by changing the courts or changing the Constitution.
Thank you. Congressman, what would you do to restore fiscal responsibility and promote creation of jobs in the United States?
Okay, the fiscal responsibility, I alluded to that a bit in my opening remarks, because it is related to the monetary system, but it's also related to the people's appetite for government. If we as a people continue to believe that we should have an entitlement system from cradle to grave, and if you believe that we should be the policemen of the world and have 150 bases and 150 countries, 900 bases around the world, and that is proper. If we reject the bases around the world, and that is proper. If we reject the admonition of the founders that said, stay out of entangling alliances and don't get involved in the internal affairs of other nations, you can't do it. You can't get back to it because we have allowed this desire to do so much. The appetite was bigger than we could afford, and it took so long for us to destroy the productive capacity of this country. For a long time we were the freest and the most prosperous, and then we started to overspend, and then we tried to raise taxes, and that was limited. Then we got borrowing. There was a limit to borrowing. But we had this neat little deal. We sent the treasury bills over to the Fed, and they created money out of thin air, which removed the restraints on the politicians. Politicians get reelected by spending money. Did you ever notice that? They come and they spend money and brag about it, and they get reelected. But what did it do? It destroyed our jobs, chased our jobs overseas, and gave us this mountain of debt. And so the monetary system, if you could not have monetizing of debt, if we did what the founders said, the founders were biblically oriented, but they did, they did bend the rules. They broke the rules themselves with the continental dollar. What they did was they destroyed the continental dollar, and they were burnt. And that's why they said no paper money, and only gold and silver can be used. But we threw that out of the window without amending the Constitution, where we introduced this notion of corruption in the money and then this explosion of debt. You will not get jobs back now until the debt is taken care of. That is why I've never voted for, the only appropriation bill I've voted over all these years has been to help the veterans. And we now have to deal with it because When you have lower interest rates and too much spending and pyramiding of debt, what you do is you get tremendous malinvestment and debt that is run away, and so the debt has to be liquidated. If you have too much debt, you have to get your debt down before you can get your economy, your own personal economy, growing again. So you cannot get jobs coming back again. We're not seeing them. We've had 30 million increase in our population since the year 2000 and no new jobs. That is unsustainable. So therefore, we have to look at monetary policy, spending policy, foreign policy, entitlement policy, and the restriction would best be done to get our jobs back by having honest money. We have chased our jobs overseas because of bad economic policy. We have lost faith and confidence in what a free market is all about. We've lost confidence, and we have lost our determination to follow the rule of law and do only those things that are authorized in our Constitution. If we did that, it would take a short period of time, but we could get back on our feet again, and we would have the jobs. Thank you very much.